Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's show, kind of a special episode, as we will start off the show answering your fan questions submitted on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. And in conjunction with a contest, Dave and I will pick our favorite 3 questions for an opportunity to win some prizes. And, of course, this weekend is UFC 185, so once again, we're going to pick the main card fights for that card down in Dallas, Texas, which features a huge main event and co-main event, both for a UFC championship. So, with the Juice, Dave Sadler. How's it going, Dave?
Great. Ironically, I'm trying to post the link to my Facebook page as we're talking, and I have the link of the show. So it's like I'm watching the show, and I'm a part of the show because it's popped up on my screen. It's very.
I think that's called Inception, right?
Yeah, like I feel like this isn't going to turn out well. Hey, is there any snow on the ground there?
A little bit left. There's still some snow left.
Cool. There's none here. It's very wet.
Yeah, it hasn't all melted yet. Believe it or not, when the Super Bowl happened and all that snow hit here, I think that's the most of the snow that's still melting is the snow from the Super Bowl. So,
Nice.
still a lot of that's still melting, but it is nice weather here in Detroit, which is good. So don't have to worry about bundling up or running a heater here in the Beyond the Cage studios because sometimes it gets a little cold in the studios. So I got to run a little feet heater, but
Yeah,
no more.
Yeah, clearly it's much nicer. We both have our hats on backwards.
We're trying. This is the Ken Griffey Jr. appreciation episode. All right. Of course, again, I'm Jim Graham, your host of Here Beyond the Cage. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Dave is at Vigilante Juice. And let's start off the show, as I mentioned, with our fan questions. We have, I think, 16 questions submitted by fans of Beyond the Cage that went to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. And, of course, all 16 question writers were entered to win a prize pack here from Beyond the Cage. 3 prizes we will be giving away. Just to show you, if you missed out, we'll be doing another one next month. I just got some good stuff in.
Hey,
so don't worry if you missed this one. We'll have another one next month. But yes, Dave.
Jim, you say prizes. What types of prizes?
Well, I can't show you the one because it's a card mystery pack. It's a UFC card mystery pack. But it will be around 30, 35 cards, somewhere around there. And it will include 1 autograph card and 1 relic card, guaranteed.
So you're telling me that somebody who submitted a question, just a question, is going to win cards? That's cool.
Yep. And then our next prize for one of our favorite questions, they get an autographed photo from Miss Paige Van Zandt. So that's going to be that's prize number 2. You're thinking, how can we top that, right? Well, the grand prize is not 1 but 2 signed photos from Cleveland's own Stipe Miocic and Jessica Evil Eye. That is the grand prize here for our 16. So that's about a little less than 1 than 5. That's pretty good odds.
Yeah, that'll be the end of my attacks for the day.
All right. So let's we're gonna read them in order, and then after reading all the questions, Dave and I will pick which ones we like the best, and we'll announce the winners, and then we'll notify the winners via Facebook message. And if you read the official contest post, which I hope you did, you have 24 hours to respond to said message. If you don't, we have to pick another person.
Say what?
Yeah, we're prompt here on Beyond the Cage. We got Dave and I have things to do. You know, we can't sit around and
not
wait
too many
all day.
things, but we have things to do.
Right. Okay, we'll start off first here. John S. He writes in, does the UFC still need New York, or is the sport big enough that New York is just another place? Dave, we'll get your answer first.
Does the UFC need New York? I don't care who was on the card, Jim. Could even be Brian Caraway. If they get into Madison Square Garden, I'm going. I don't think they need New York, but New York is a destination. I've never been to New York. If they're in Madison Square Garden, 100% I'm going. It's like they say in wrestling, it's best for business to be in New York.
I am along the same lines. I think they don't need New York. They've done very well without going to the whole entire state. I think that's pretty safe to say they've done pretty well without doing any events in the state of New York. But if they were able to do an event in New York, and really looking at the grand scheme of things, obviously Madison Square Garden is the crown jewel. We all know that. But there's a lot of great venues and a lot of great places in New York that they can put on events, the whole state. I mean, they have that brand new Barclays Center where the Brooklyn Nets play and the New York Islanders play. That place is gorgeous. I'm sure they'll probably do an event there. Maybe they like these outdoor fights. Yankee Stadium has hosted a boxing fight. Could be a chance. Maybe they do a UFC fight at Yankee Stadium. That'd be pretty crazy. You Syracuse. Have some nice, you got Syracuse. You could do the Carrier Dome for a big event, or I believe it's the RBC Center where the Buffalo Sabres play. Yeah. So I mean, there's some good events and venues in New York. So
if they go to New York, they have to go to MSG first.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. That has to be first, and then you can kind of move down longer. Now, of course, as fans know, I'll be going to the event in New Jersey, and as much as New Jersey is trying to capture that share of the New York market, until it's actually in New York, then maybe those events in New Jersey will kind of have more weight because you've had that initial event in New York. So I think having the event in New York helps their already fantastic events they've had in New Jersey. And I think regardless where they go, if you're able to kind of plant the seed, so to speak, having a few events in New York City, you may get those fans that may be thinking like, I'm not going to travel into New Jersey for a fight. Maybe you can introduce them to like, wow, we saw this fight at Madison Square Garden. We saw this at the Barclays. We'll travel the extra, hour, 2 hours to go down and see an event in New Jersey.
Right.
And I think it really helps it, in a big market, but it doesn't need it. But to say it doesn't help is ludicrous.
Correct. Good question.
All right, our next question up here is from Sny Guy. He wrote in, conspiracy guy question, but he put, is the UFC using Scott Coker as a puppet in Bellator to create the illusion of competition and put a damper on any potential lawsuits that claim the UFC is a monopoly? Now, of course, to be a monopoly, you have to own all levels and stage of production. That's technically what a monopoly is. So the UFC would have to own everything to help run their organization, which they don't. So that'd be very hard to prove. That means like trucks and TV and cement and all that stuff. That's technically what a monopoly is. I don't think they'll ever be that. But I will admit, I was just thinking about this the other day. Scott Coker's made some very interesting moves here in Bellator, and I don't necessarily know if they're the right moves for Bellator. And there are moves to me, Dave, that are not moves that he made when he was running with Strikeforce. So I think a conspiracy question from Snag, I think is kind of, to analyze what Scott Coker's actually doing. Because he left the UFC on good terms. Dana White's friends with Scott Coker. I don't know. It just seems, I don't know if he's lost his mind or maybe he's just like, hey, I have control of this company. I don't think they're going to fire me anytime soon. Let's just do some crazy stuff. I'm not sure, but when the outside looking in, he's made some very curious moves since stepping into Bellator. Not quite a year. What we're at, like 8 months. He's made some interesting moves in those 8 months. I will say that.
Yeah. I was going to ask SNY guy if how many planes he saw enter the World Trade Center, since he's a big conspiracy theory guy. But that's for a totally different podcast. No, pretty much what I can say is that it's hard to disagree with what you're saying about Scott Coker. Yeah, Ken Shamrock and Kimbo, I mean, I guess that's cool. 40 years after it should happen. And, like bring in Fedor in. I mean, those are things that, like, I don't know what it's doing for business. I mean, like, it's cool to see Fedor. It's cool to see these guys. But, they're not bringing in. Why is somebody like Cody Bollinger and some of these other guys, why are they going to Titan and RFA when they should be coming to Bellator? He doesn't seem to be signing a whole lot of prospects. It's all a lot of has-beens and, washed-up talent. So it's interesting.
All right, our next question comes from Thomas B. He writes in, with the UFC's new Reebok deal happening, do you feel that this will push fighters away from the UFC in pursuits of contracts elsewhere to help keep more sponsorship checks? My answer, I'll go here, Dave, is no. The UFC is the place to be. It's the highest level of competition. If you want to fight lesser competition for more money, go ahead. If your sole purpose in fighting is money, then yeah, by all means go somewhere else. But if you think you have a chance to be in the best in the world, guess what? You're going to get paid like the best in the world with Reebok. And again, the Reebok deal, as we've said several times, and we talked it over when we had MMA manager Adam Martin on, you can still seek sponsorship opportunities outside the cage and really heavily promoting through social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. I think I covered all the major bases.
Instagram.
Google Plus, yeah, Instagram, Foursquare. I don't know what else is out there. LinkedIn, is that still a thing? I don't know, but there are ways to promote a brand or a company and still receive compensation for. Or you look at a case of a lot of the expos that go on. You can promote that company at an expo. Like the Arnold Fitness Expo, of course, the UFC Expo. There's LA Fit Expo. I think there's that World MMA show that's in New York or New Jersey area every year. So there's a lot of different conventions and stuff you can go to with sports and help promote a company that way. So there's still a way to get sponsorship money, and I don't think the Reebok deal specifically will keep people from not signing or re-upping with the UFC.
Yeah, if you want to get money, if your sole purpose is money, you can be in the UFC and get money. Like I said, since when they started the Reebok deal, you can. There's money to be made. You just got to think outside the box. I mean, it wouldn't be any different than like Mr. Ebersol. I'm pretty sure has a lifetime deal with Hayabusa. If he were to come on our podcast and keep doing this with his hat and showing it, and they keep sending him hats and gear and all sorts of stuff. I mean, you're getting free things for sitting on a podcast with a hat on. I mean, you have to be creative. I've said it 1,000 times. Why would a company invest money in you? Do something to make them invest money in you. Promote their products, so on and so forth. You get your check from the UFC. You get your check from Reebok during fight week. And like I said, if you fight 3 times a year, that's 49 other weeks that you can be getting sponsorship checks from other sponsors.
And just real quickly, we had Darren Cruikshank on last week. I asked him, you going to the Arnold? He's like, of course. He's like, I use this product Rev Gear. I'll be at their booth. I've been using it for years. And right there, he just promoted that company just by me asking him what he was going to do at the Arnold. I wasn't even asking about a specific company, but he brought that up. So... And that's kind of what he's paid for. And he talked about how he uses the product as well, I believe.
Yeah, wasn't he talking about a bed or something?
Yeah, it was to help you kind of sleep and make sure you get the best sleep you can.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, it's that easy.
All right, good question though. So we got a lot of good questions here. We'll move on here with Sean C. He writes in, with the nightmare that the UFC has been facing, doping, missing weight, canceled fight, injured champions, Burt Watson leaving, etc., do you see the Big Show suffering a substantial fall from it all? Now, all those have been problems here for the UFC. Now, the Burt Watson thing, he was their event coordinator. Not everyone knows Burt Watson. This is kind of if you're in the know in MMA, you know who Burt Watson is. You probably have seen him at events and probably have shook his hand and whatnot. But if you're a casual MMA fan, you have no idea who Burt Watson is. You have no idea what he does and him leaving the company, what that's going to do. Most people, that's kind of insignificant. Now, the other issues, those are headlines that you'll see on SportsCenter. canceling fights, missing weight, champions get, those are the headlines people will pay attention to. Now, I'm not saying Burt Watson isn't going to have an effect leaving the company. The guy had been there for a very long time and did his job very well, and most people seem to like him. So I think that will have an effect, but the other ones are what people are going to really gravitate to, and at least on the doping issue, that seems to be, hopefully will be resolved in July with their new standards in terms of performance-enhancing drugs. Canceling fights, I don't know. I don't know if that will be solved because some cards are just going to be good and some cards are just not going to be good. And if one or two fights happen to fall out, the fight is risk cancel. I mean, they've canceled, what, 2 fights here, Dave, since 2001? Am I... Yeah. So yeah. I wouldn't say it's that big an issue. I think they'll be all right. I think the injured champion things is maybe I think out of all those, probably missing weight and the champions getting hurt are probably the 2 biggest concerns. And I think moving forward they're going to have to set up something similar to the performance enhancing drugs and set up some type of system for missing weight. Like you get so many strikes, then you're either forced to move up, severe pay cut, suspension. I think that will have to be something that will have to come down the line. And for injured champions, there's got to be more of a guideline. Like if you're not able to defend your title in a calendar year, you don't have that title. And it shouldn't always be your next fight back is an automatic fight for the title. Maybe some more restrictions there. So I don't think they're going to see a substantial fall, but I think some guidelines to ensure that this stuff doesn't get out of hand do have to happen, so there's not a substantial fall, really down the road.
It'll be interesting to see the fallout this week with Burt not being there, because it's one of those things where I'm the guy that does my specific job at work on my shift, and if I just didn't come to work, what happens? Like, do they have somebody ready to step into Burt's shoes, or is it just going to kind of be like, hey, let's fly by the seat of our pants? Because he was kind of the glue that makes it all stick together in fight week. But like you said, those other ones are big headlines. Ones that people will, those are the ones that people will be like, oh, it's not a real sport. They're champions on cocaine, or those are the ones that people can use and kind of defend their position that the UFC is not a top tier sport and all that kind of stuff, or that MMA isn't, specifically the UFC. But they'll survive. As much as people hate the fact that people miss weight, the drug failures, the canceling of events is going to happen just because you're promoting so many events. But, those other things, people are mad for a week, but everybody was mad that Jones tested positive, but I guarantee you all the people who normally go to fights in Vegas will be there in May when he fights Rumble.
All right. The next 2 are kind of very similar, so we're going to kind of play off of them. We have Ed H. He wrote in, if Anthony Johnson doesn't beat John Jones, how soon before we see a fight at heavyweight? And then Brian H. wrote in, if Anthony Johnson doesn't beat John Jones again, who will be the man to do it? So I figured we can kind of combine the questions there from Ed and Brian a little bit. And if Anthony Johnson cannot beat John Jones, I still think Alexander Gustafsson can beat him. And I think, and that plays off of Ed's question about heavyweight, I think that he has to beat Gustafsson before he moves up to heavyweight. That fight was so close. So many people liked that fight. It was exciting. It was a great main event that I think they have to do it a second time before you can say that John Jones is clear the light heavyweight division.
I agree. I want to see DC and I want to see Gustafsson both get a second shot at Jones. If he beats Gustafsson, give him DC again, and see how that plays out. Did one of them say did the one question say who do I think is going to beat him, or no?
It said if Johnson can't beat Jones, who will be the man to do it?
Yeah, I think it's DC or Gustafsson.
Yeah, and I think a move like I said, if he can beat Rumble Johnson, again, there could be a case that that's a really close fight, Dave, and there's a rematch out of that.
Yeah.
So we're trying our best to predict the future, but like I said, I would say at the very least he has to go up against Gustafsson one more time. I think the fans want that fight, and I think that's a fight that they can book very easily and sell pay-per-views on.
And don't forget, if Jones does lose a fight to Rumble or to Gustafsson or to DC, you know that's going to get played back yet again because of how dominant he's been. So the move to heavyweight's going to be a while, especially if he gets a loss.
All right. Thanks, Brian and Ed, for the questions there. And then this one, Micah T, he wrote in, will Aldo shut up Conor McGregor? I hate to give a pick too early. I don't want to give a pick, but I think Aldo can. I mean, the dude hasn't lost in 7 years. I would say his odds of beating anyone are pretty good. And if anyone can beat Conor McGregor, I would say Aldo is a man that can do that.
I would agree. I hope to God that fight does not go 4 rounds because we've never seen either guy look impressive after. Aldo seems to fade, and we've never seen Conor go that long.
All right, next question. Keith N., he wrote in, do you feel that Shamrock versus Kimbo here in 2015 will be more or less of a draw than it would have been when it was originally scheduled in 2008? And also, how do you think it will do competing against a UFC event on the same night, albeit a regular fight night? Honestly, more people get Spike than Fox Sports 1, unless the Fox Sports 1 fight is Conor McGregor, which it's not. I would imagine that the Spike fight will do better numbers. That doesn't necessarily mean it will be a better fight card. I think the allure of Kimbo 2015, it cannot be as high as it would have been when they scheduled that fight in 2008. There's no way. Kimbo was at the height of his popularity, and I think Ken Shamrock wasn't that far removed from his Tito Ortiz kind of big feud with the UFC. There's no way now it's a bigger draw than it was then. No way. Does that mean people won't tune in? I don't know. We'll find out. But I don't think it's as big of a draw. But I also do think it will be a slightly bigger draw and more intrigue is the word I would use than whatever the UFC puts on that night.
I'm looking at my calendar because I have that app where the UFC put every event onto my calendar. June 20th. The UFC event on the same day is only on Fight Pass.
Okay, then yes, it will do substantially better than whatever that. So that means it's in another country. So yeah, it will do way better than that. Now that I know it's a Fight Pass, not Fox Sports 1, yes, then people will definitely be glued in to that matchup way more than the UFC fight. That's a fact.
Yeah. What was the other part of the question?
Do you think it's a bigger draw now or back in 2008?
People are gonna DVR it, and I don't think people are gonna say, "Hey, everybody, come over to my house. We're gonna watch the fights. Kimbo and Shamrock are on." I don't think that's gonna go down. I mean, so short answer is no. It doesn't have the same intrigue.
And plus, again, if you want to look at viewers, the first fight was supposed to be on CBS, broadcast television.
Yeah.
This event's on Spike. Don't get me wrong, Spike's grown a lot since 2008, but they're not CBS.
Yep.
All right. Good question, though. Our next question here comes from Matt M. Going along with Bellator here. Will their talent ever rival the UFC's? I think if they continue on the path they're going, Dave, getting guys like Kimbo and Shamrock to main event, no, it never will. But, as we've mentioned, if they can somehow combine maybe with the World Series of Fighting or Titan or maybe one of these other organizations to kind of build upon some talent of both organizations and their power that they've already created in somewhat level of notoriety, then maybe they can start to make a run on it. I mean, Strikeforce for what it was. It wasn't very deep, but it did have a lot of good talent. And I think Scott Coker showed that he was able to build talent outside the UFC. So he has a track record for it, but he's going to have to do a move to get more talent. You know, speaking of Kimbo Shamrock, that was an Elite XC card. What happened when Elite XC folded? A lot of that talent ended up going to where? Strikeforce. And didn't Strikeforce see a boom in talent and notoriety?
Yep.
Exactly. They need to do something like they need to do a move like that. Otherwise, the way they're going, they're never going to rival the UFC's talent or prestige level or money level.
Yeah. I don't think it'll ever rise. I also don't. I don't think that their talent level. Was talent level? Was that what he said?
Yes.
Will their talent level rise? Yeah. I don't think their talent level has to rise in order for them to be successful. Being the number 2 promotion in the world isn't the worst thing possible for Bellator. You know what I mean? I don't think their talent level will ever match the UFC, but nobody's gonna. The Arena Football League, their talent level is never gonna match the NFL. But if you're where an Arena Football League team is, they'll still take your money. Same thing with Bellator. You know, realizing that you're a feeder system isn't awful.
Right.
So, good question.
All right. Our next question here comes from Wes R. And he says, if Rousey was to clean out the rest of her division in women's MMA, including a win against Cyborg, is there a athletic commission in the world that would let her compete against men? And would she do it? And then he went on to say, I know her fighting men started as a joke, but it seems to be gaining seriousness from everybody. She has many times said she would fight Brian Caraway and that she would destroy him. All right, I will, and that kind of combines with Sarah J's question, as she wrote in, do you think Rousey will break down and fight men in her division to prove that she is the best? So kind of those combo between Wes and Sarah, basically about Rousey fighting men, and we'll let you answer there first, Dave.
First and foremost, love the question, and I love anything that has to do with Brian Caraway getting beat up. I'm 100% behind that. Nothing? No laugh, Jim?
Yeah,
Smile?
I gotcha.
All right. But the biggest problem is the same thing I said before about Jones and the cocaine issue. They've been trying to get the UFC on cable TV for how long? They couldn't even get on pay-per-view 20 years ago. Could you imagine them trying to put this on TV? Like, just the ramifications from booking a man versus a woman, and the fact that a woman could lose, and a man punching a woman. Like, they're just, it's fun to talk about and all that, but I just don't see it happening. They've come too far, and it's taken too long to get where they're at. I just don't see it.
All right, to have this happen, let me just go through the scenarios of what probably would have to happen. If Ronda Rousey wanted to fight men, or really just not in the UFC, she couldn't do in the UFC, I'll put it that way. The UFC, regardless of the country, would never put a man against a woman. So first of all, she'd have to leave the UFC. Second of all, the UFC probably wouldn't let her leave, or if they did, there'd be some serious legal junctions preventing her from leaving.
Right.
2, if she then successfully leaves the UFC, she'd have to fight in another country, probably Asia or maybe even Brazil, because there's no way a U.S. or Canadian athletic commission will let a man fight a woman. There's that right off the bat. Let's say that all the clear the hurdles, she has a fight in Singapore or something, and she's fighting a man. What man again is she fighting? Because it's not going to be a UFC caliber. Someone from the UFC going to leave so they can fight Ronda Rousey?
Right.
And then what? And then what does it prove if she beats a man that's not one of the top guys? She probably beats dudes up in training all the time. That doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't mean anything, because if she fought the top men bantamweight fighters, she would lose. Is she beating Uriah Faber, Dominic Cruz, T.J. Dillashaw, Renan Barão? I don't think she's beating those guys, Dave. She could beat some of the lower level guys. I think she could probably beat Brian Caraway or Eric Perez or a Dustin Page or maybe a Johnny Bedford. You know what I mean? But she not beating the top bantamweights in the world. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's got real sick hands until Eddie punches her right in the face.
I mean, Eddie Wineland, what, he triples his body weight in squat? Is Ronda doing that?
Yeah.
Eddie Wineland be a tough match. We talked to Mike Easton a while ago, Dave. He said he normally walks around at 170 pounds. What is Ronda max now, 150? Mike Easton's a brick house, dude. You know what I mean? Like, there are some good bantamweights I don't think she's beating. Could she beat, again, she can beat some guys up. She probably does in training all the time. We don't see that footage, but the top guys she's not beating.
Nope,
so
I agree.
I just laid out this. It's a good question. It's interesting to sit and talk about. You know, go back to the days, you know, barbershop, talk about boxing and basketball and all that. It's like a barbershop type of thing, but yeah, it's not going to happen. And if it does, it's going to be very poorly executed by a company that's not the UFC, and it's going to kind of look like a sham. All right. Thanks for writing in, though, Wes and Sarah. Okay, next question here is from Hunter H. Kind of a multi-part question, but all around kind of the same thing here. How come Aldo and McGregor is the main event over Lawler and McDonald when, of course, Lawler and McDonald is the heavier weight class, which is almost always the main event by what Dana White has said in previous press conference stuff? Is it because Dana has a huge crush on Conor? Do you think it's disrespectful to and do you think it's disrespectful to Robbie? Now, I think, Dave, this has happened only one other time where the lighter weight class was the main event, and that's when Uriah Faber fought Barão for the bantamweight title. The co-main event was technically Aldo and Lamas. That was last year's Super Bowl Saturday card, UFC 169 in New Jersey.
Right.
So technically the lighter weight class went first. Now, in the case of that, it's 10 pounds. Is there that much difference between bantamweight and featherweight? No, but it has happened before. Now, in this case, you can clearly tell it's because of Conor McGregor, for no other reason than that. Do I think it's disrespectful to Robbie Lawler? A little bit, but at the same time, his last time he main evented a card, he shared the spotlight with Anthony Pettis and Gilbert Melendez too, even though his fight against Hendricks was the main event. People were talking about both those fights. Now, will his fight maybe get a little glossed over because of all the hype of Conor McGregor? Sure, but I think Robbie Lawler's been around the game so long, I don't think that stuff bothers him. You know, if he was a young guy that had just become champ, you know, kind of like what we hear about Carlos Esparza talking like, why aren't they promoting me? He would maybe have that attitude. But Robbie Lawler's now 32. He's fought for 13 years professionally. He's now champ. I don't think that stuff bothers him, to be honest. And I don't think it bothers McDonald either. McDonald's been working so hard and so long for that shot. The fact that he got it, I don't think he cares when that fight is.
Right.
But I will say it is disrespectful. The heavier class should be the main event. The focus should be on Robbie Lawler. I have no problem with Aldo and McGregor being their own pay-per-view. I don't think they need a fight like Lawler and McDonald to help prop it up. But they wanted a really stacked card, and so that's what they gave us fans. So, you know, I don't have too much of a problem with it. But yeah, I do think the Lawler fight should be the main event.
Yeah, it's definitely disrespectful to Robbie. Robbie's not going to say anything. And Dana loves Conor. Pretty simple as that.
Yeah, it's definite because I mean we've said this several times. He probably should have had another fight after Dennis Seaver before he's got his title shot. He got it anyway, and he's main eventing. So, yep. All right, good question though. He technically wrote in. I forgot. He wrote in just a joke question. He said, when there are female fights, should there be ring card guys? And immediately I was like, no.
No.
Nope, never going to happen. All right, let's move on. David K., he wrote in, our good friend DK, he wrote in, do you think Silva's failed drug test, Anderson Silva that is, and his performance in his last few fights will tarnish his legacy? I'll let you start off here first, Dave.
That was from DK, right?
Yes.
You know, it should. Even though this was coming off a huge injury, how can it not call into question everything that he's done? He's he's been far and away the best fighter on the roster for a long period of time. But why was he far and away the best? His skills, was the testing up to par the whole time he's been in the UFC? I'm not saying he was on something, but the fact that he was popped on multiple tests during that lead up and after that fight, to be fair, you have to question it.
I think it does tarnish his legacy, and this is a case, especially if it ends up being his last time he ever fought against Nick Diaz, which I think is a very real possibility. I think that's what really will help kind of seal his fate a little bit. You add that in, 2 failed drug tests with the event. You add his last 2 fights were losses. Whether you think they were flukes or not, he still lost those fights. And then he comes in, fails 2 different tests, and barely beats a guy fighting up 15 pounds. I think it does a little bit. Now, in a couple of years, Dave, maybe 5 years down the road, we're not really thinking about Anderson Silva. We really haven't heard from Anderson Silva. The UFC invites him back to be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. We'll probably really sit back and look and go, you know what, Anderson Silva was truly amazing, and we were glad to have seen him fight for as long as we did and win as many fights as we did. And I think you can say the same way as I'm a Green Bay Packers fan, and obviously the way Brett Favre left the organization left some people sour, and they're now finally bringing him back a couple years later. I think it's cooled off a little bit, all the different teams he played for and any other allegations that have happened to him, and I think now fans are like, you know what, Brett Favre was pretty awesome to this organization, this community, and we're glad to see him come back and retire his number and all that jazz. So I think for the short term here in the next couple of years, Anderson Silva will not be looked on in the same light as he was maybe just about a year ago. But I think in due time, he will be remembered for what he was, one of the greatest fighters to ever compete in mixed martial arts. All right, let's get on to next question. Good question, David. Matt L., he writes in, who do you think has the greatest chance of taking the belt from each champion?
I have notes for this one.
Oh, man. Let's see. Man, in heavyweight, I think, to be honest...
No one.
What?
No one.
No one? Well, here's my answer. This is going to shock you. The only person who has a chance of beating Cain Velasquez is Cain Velasquez because he gets hurt all the time. He may be his own downfall, and that's how he loses his belt. Like that? Huh? That's thinking outside the box right there. I think that's going beyond the cage. If you know what I mean. See what I did there? All right, so light heavyweight, we kind of answer that a little bit, at least for me. John Jones or Rumble Johnson. I think those are the 2 guys at light heavyweight. At middleweight, I think Lito Machida could do it. He came very close. I think he kind of had a bad strategy. I think Weidman can beat him again, but I also think Machida could beat him if they rematch. I think Vitor Belfort has a very legitimate shot of winning the belt. I think Jacare Souza has a very legitimate chance at winning the belt. Those would be my kind of 3 guys. I would put, because Vitor's about to fight him, I guess I put his odds higher, but I think Machida is very close as well. You go on those 3 divisions, Dave.
Well, I need to go to 170. I put that Lawler retains for a while. I think that he holds the belt for a little bit. I think the same at 185. And at 205, I definitely want to see Jones Gustafsson too and DC Jones too, like I said earlier.
170, obviously Hendricks can win. He's beaten Lawler once. I don't see why he couldn't do it again. I think if Lombard can get the drugs out of his system, I think Hector Lombard is a very dangerous dude. He's a very dangerous dude to be messing with. And I think if he can kind of work on his footwork, Dave, Tyrone Woodley can be a threat. And also, once he returns, let's not forget he did get the interim title, Natural Born Killer. That guy can finish fights anywhere. He's tough as nails, has great conditioning, and he's always a threat. And I think he could beat Robbie Lawler. So I think there are some guys out there. 155. Dos Anjos has a chance, but I think Gilbert Melendez, he was winning that fight up until the submission, so Dilbert can definitely get in there. Habib's an interesting matchup with his grappling. I know Pettis has already beat him once, but the way Donald Cerrone has been fighting lately, it's hard to not root for the Cowboy in any matchup that he goes against. I think those are some likely candidates. Featherweight, obviously McGregor has his chance here, but I think honestly, if Aldo beats McGregor, Aldo may have to move up a division because he would beat just about everybody at that point. I mean, there wouldn't be too many left. Maybe if a rematch with Frankie, that would probably be his best chance to lose.
At 155, I think I was going to put Dos Anjos, but since the fight is this week, I didn't think that was necessary. I think Habib's got the best chance because of his grappling. And at 45, I put Edgar/Mendez. Those are fights that I wouldn't even mind seeing again. Like you said, obviously Conor's got the chance right now, but I think that Edgar and Mendez pose the most issues to Aldo. They're a little more well-rounded, have some grappling and all that kind of stuff.
All right, now 35, interesting. I think Barao can win, but I don't think he will in the rematch. But an interesting one that I think could be Dillashaw, and because as of right now, I don't think anyone can beat Mighty Mouse at flyweight, is Mighty Mouse moving up to bantamweight to fight Dillashaw. I think that would be tremendous.
I'm going to blow your mind here. Notice I said I'm going to blow your mind and not your ACL. I'm going to say
Dominic Cruz.
Yeah, I'm going to say Cruz.
Cruz, yes, if he could ever get over those injuries, yes, Dominic Cruz, legitimate chance. Flyweight, like I said, I love Kaiji Horiguchi, but I still think he's a couple years away from trying to seriously competing with Mighty Mouse.
I don't like to make fun of guys who get hurt, but at what point do you just stop walking? Like, how many ACLs do you blow out and you're just like, I'm not going to walk ever again? We got to be getting close, right?
Oh man, yeah, he's had a lot of problems. I don't know if he can come up. So for Rousey, I haven't seen anyone that's taking her belt anytime soon.
I'm gonna blow your mind here too. You ready?
Okay.
All right. At 135 pounds, I still want to see. I still think Kat is Ronda's kryptonite. I want to see that fight go. We all saw what happened. Like, 90% of the people that I talk to feel cheated. If Kat gets beat, she gets beat. But I would love to see them mix it up. See Ronda get an actual takedown. See what happens if Kat's on top. I would just love to see it, and I think that she can be her kryptonite because, I don't know. I want to see that fight bad.
And kind of same thing with, going seriously looking at Ronda, might be a Cain Velasquez situation where she's the reason that she leaves the organization to do something else, and that's why she loses the belt. That could be a very likely scenario. And for 115, Tisha Torres.
Yeah.
Their fight on the house was so close, and I think Tisha is only getting better in her grappling. Obviously, she's known as a kickboxer, but the fact she stuffed so many takedowns against Carla, and Carla really couldn't do much when it was on the feet, I think Tisha Torres would be my pick. So, all right, that's running through the divisions of guys and gals that could possibly win the title here coming up here in 2015, and that was from Matt L., right? Yes, yeah. Matt L. Thanks. Great question. All right, we got two more questions here.
I was looking to see, does Tisha have a fight?
Yeah, she's going to be fighting Angela Hill coming up.
UFC 188 in June.
So,
cool.
Yep.
No, it's cool. Like to see her back in the cage.
Absolutely. Gabriel C. wrote in, if you could change one rule for the UFC or MMA as a whole, what would it be? And good question, first of all, and I always think about this, and it's definitely knees to the head of a grounded opponent. Now, I'm not talking about knees when you're in top on side control or if you got someone's back like that. I'm talking about that BS where that guy has his hand on the ground or one knee, and that's considered a downed opponent. You're not a down opponent unless you're on your back or on your stomach or two knees. One hand does not make you a down opponent. You should be perfectly able to knee a guy in the face. And that little iffy thing has happened, that playing the game like that, and we've heard referees like, you can't play the game, you can't keep picking up your hand. That rule needs to go. It needs to be clear. I think the biggest case is, remember when Melvin Gillard fought Ross Pearson and he kept on moving his hand up and down, and then his hand just happened to be down and Melvin kneed in the face and they ended up having to call the fight a no contest? We can't have stuff like that. And you're looking to try to do the most offense and you're in a flurry and stuff, you can't be worried about where some dude's hand is. You know, like I said, if a guy clearly has two knees, you know when a guy is on his knees or on his back or on his stomach. Those areas you should not knee. But I think that little tweak of the rule will make the sport, I hate to say safer because, knees are brutal, but it'll make it easier to define when you're able to strike someone with your knee. Because I think those are underutilized weapons because of a rule like that. So I think that rule absolutely needs to be changed.
I don't know if this is a rule as much as I would love to see it implemented, is instant replay. For those reasons, our good friend Nick from A&N Sports Cards always gives me crap about the whole Misha Cat thing. If you're going to be able to play that game where your hand's on the ground, it's off the ground, if I accidentally knee you, there should be a way to check it. If you're going to be a top-tier sport, I mean, the NHL, doesn't matter if it's a regular season game, a preseason game, they make a call all the way to New York to have somebody determine if it was a goal or not.
Actually, Toronto.
Or Toronto. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And now baseball's doing it. The referee is human. If there's something that he can't see, I just wish these guys put a lot on the line, and if there's blatant cheating or whatever the case may be, there should be a way to rectify the situation. Just evolve, I guess.
In the case of that, especially when it's reviewing to make sure if a foul was indeed illegal, the person that gets fouled has 5 minutes to recover. You're telling me that a referee in that 5 minutes that they're giving the fighter can't go over and check a monitor real quick?
Yep.
So to me, there's already time built in. You're not wasting extra time by him doing this.
Right.
So, yeah. Good question, though, Gabe. All right, and our last question.
Last but not least.
Eric T., he wrote in, after Cat, he said, sorry, Dave, but he said after Cat had a bonehead game plan and lost rather quick, who do you think is deserving of the next title shot against Ronda, and who do you think matches up best with against her? Well, like we said, she is kind of ran through everybody, and to go back on that earlier question by Matt, who has the best chance of winning, I don't know. She seems to be just so dominant, but I think we talked about this a little bit last week. I think if they have to pick somebody, if they're like, we have to have Ronda fight again, we have to do it soon, I think Jessica Ai is the most likely scenario. But if they can wait, decide a true number one contender, I'd love to see the winner of Betch Kahea and Jessica Ai fight to take on Ronda. That, to me, would be the best scenario, would be to book that fight. But if you got to pick one, I think Jessica, even though, again, she's only 1-1 with a no contest, if you want to look at that, the level of talent she has fought so far in the UFC outweighs what Betch Kahea has fought in the UFC. And I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, it is what it is with Ronda is so great, the most amazing fighter on earth, What is the rush for her to get in the cage right away? Is it a money grab? You're supposed to put on the best fights available. Honestly, 110%. Can you tell me that the best fight that they can put on is Ronda Rousey versus Jessica Ai? Not one person can tell me that that is the best fight for business. If Ronda has to get into the cage, then it's the only fight that you can make. But she's making millions and millions of dollars. You're the greatest fighting organization on earth. Make a true number one contender. You have it perfectly laid out. You have Alexis Davis and Sarah Kaufman that are going to fight in a month. Kat is available to fight. Betch is ready to fight. Jessica's ready to fight. Misha should be ready to fight soon. Make yourself a mini tournament with the winner getting a title shot against Ronda at the end of the year. How is that a lose-lose situation? I'm the biggest Kat Zingano fan on the planet. I'm pretty sure Eric's the biggest Jessica Ai fan on the planet. I think that Kat can beat anybody in the division. So book her against somebody. Book her against Misha. If you're a Jessica Ai fan, if she's going to beat Ronda, she should steamroll Betch Correia. So book these fights. Alexis Davis, Sarah Kaufman, Kat, Misha, Betch, Jessica, and then put the winners together, or who looks the best, put those together. The winner of that gets the title shot. I mean, was Kat's game plan dumb? Yeah, probably. How was Alexis Davis's game plan at UFC 175?
Right.
Not the best game plan you've ever seen either. It drives me nuts. Like, these girls fight, they train, they do all this for their ranking. And like I said, the best thing that we can possibly do, and I love Jessica Ai. When she comes on, she's great, she's hilarious. She's 1-1-1. She failed the drug test and won a fight via doctor stoppage. She looked impressive in the doctor stoppage, but there's always that, like, you never know what was going to happen. And leading up to the Kat fight, hey, she's undefeated. She beat Misha. She finished this one. Leading up to, was it Sarah McMahon? Wasn't she undefeated?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was undefeated. The Olympics were on. They were like, here's the Olympic, the two Olympians and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm done. Last thing. If they have to have Ronda fight, then it has to be Ronda and Jessica. If they want it to be the best fights available, then you need to do this little mini tournament that I've laid out.
All right. Well, with that, we got to decide who's going to win some prizes based on. Man, all these questions were good. So just because you didn't win didn't mean that you didn't have a good question. I mean, we had 16 great questions, but we could only pick 3. But like I said, we're going to have a contest again next month. Maybe something similar, maybe something different, but we will have more prizes. So don't feel like you're going to miss out. You're never going to win a prize. Have a chance to win a prize again. So, but again, thanks to everyone that entered, subscribed to our YouTube channel, liked our Facebook page. We really appreciate the support before we do anything else.
Hey, if you don't win a prize, what you can do is get on your computer, go to MMAsignaturesusa.com, and buy yourself a prize.
That's good looking out, Dave. That's a good tip.
You could go to fightchicks.com and buy a T-shirt.
Either one.
Just because we're not giving it to you, it doesn't mean you can't give yourself a prize. It's almost payday.
That's true. All right. Well, here we go.
The greatest broadcast journalist of all time.
All right. I don't want to say third place, but we'll say this was a good question.
So close, yet the inaugural Beyond the Cage, so close, yet so far away.
The winner of a mystery pack of UFC cards, as I said, will include 1 autograph card and 1 relic card, is Mr. Sny Guy. He will win the mystery pack of cards. All right, so you'll be notified following the show to get your cards sent to you. Our next winner
Oh, screwed it up.
That's all right. Well, you were plotting for Paige Van Zandt here. The winner of the Paige Van Zandt signed phono, Mr. Gabriel C. He wins the Paige Van Zandt signed phono here for his great question. And then the grand prize winner. This one was tough. Very tough. But they get the Jessica I. Stipe Miocic signed photos.
Why don't you tell us what the question was?
Okay, his question was, does the UFC need New York, or does just another city? And that was wrote in by John S. So, John, for your great question, you're getting Stipe and Jessica added to your collection. So, again, winners will be notified following this episode of Beyond the Cage. Again, you have 24 hours to respond with a correct mailing address. Doesn't matter where you live internationally or here in the United States, we will ship it to you free of charge. That is a Cage guarantee. So, all right, congrats to all the winners. And again, thanks for everybody that wrote in there as I lose my headphones. I'm so excited there. I lose my headphones. So, once again, thanks for writing in, everybody. And like I said, we're going to be running a contest next month just before I head out to New Jersey for UFC on Fox 15. So that's about a month away. So get prepared. We'll have some good prizes on tap for that one as well. All right. Let's move on, Dave. UFC 185 this weekend. The Big D, as they call it. Dallas, Texas American Airlines Arena. You want to go with the Big D? That's your new nickname now? No. All right. He's saying no to that. All right. We'll move on. UFC 185. 5 fights on the main card pay-per-view this Saturday, March 14th. First fight of the evening in the flyweight division as former #1 contender Chris Carriazo will take on Henry. I think it's Cejudo?
Yeah.
Cejudo? Cejudo?
Yeah. The guy that sort of makes weight.
It's not Cujo. Anyways. All right. Carriazo, 7-4 in the UFC. His last fight, he lost the fight for the flyweight title to Mighty Mouse Johnson at 178, and 12 of his 17 career victories are by decision. Looking at his opponent, Mr. Henry, 1-0 in the UFC. His debut was a victory over Dustin Kimura at Fox 13. He is undefeated in his career at 7-0, and of those 7 victories, 3 are by knockout. Now, Dustin Kimura is a solid competitor. He beat him, but Chris Carriazo, I think has been around for a while, not just in the UFC, but in MMA. He's fought at 2 different weight classes. He's had a pretty decent level of success, and I don't think Henry's fought anyone at his level. Now, that's not to say that Henry can't go in there and win, but Chris Carriazo, I know it's technically his second fight, but that's his first real big fight. You're at the first fight of a pay-per-view main card. This is a really big stage for Henry. And regardless of how that fight went for Carriazo, this guy's coming off of main eventing a card. So I don't think fighting the first fight of the pay-per-view will bother Carriazo. In fact, he'll probably feel more relaxed that he's not fighting Mighty Mouse Johnson. So I think for Henry, I think he's got to trying to out-grapple Carriazo. I think standing up, you kind of leave fate in your hands. I think he has some knockout power in this division. He has pretty good stand-up. He's a tough guy to finish. If you can out-grapple him, maybe you can get to him that way, either on top. Maybe you can submit him, but I don't think standing up is the right strategy. But I'm leaning towards Carriazo on this one.
Yeah. I'm trying to see. Maybe I misunderstood you. I hope I didn't. But you said that the best case is for Carriazo to grapple, or vice versa?
No, for Henry to grapple Carriazo.
Okay. Because I know Henry's background, his Olympic grappling and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, did he say that backwards? But I didn't want to interrupt. No, like you said, first fight on the pay-per-view. When we saw Carriazo fight Mighty Mouse in Vegas, it seemed in the lead-up on the embedded, during the weigh-ins, he was just happy to kind of be in that position. I think Carriazo is a talented guy, but I think that the title shot was kind of thrust upon him. much like my rant just a few minutes ago. When somebody is as good as Mighty Mouse, they need to build these guys up. This should have been a fight on UFC 178. These two guys fighting to get to that Mighty Mouse level. But, I think this is a great fight. If I'm not mistaken, Jim, the biggest fight is going to be Henry making weight.
Yeah, I think he missed weight in that fight against Kimura, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember if he missed it. It says it took place, but I think he was gonna miss. Yeah. He might have weighed in over, but then did it again. But anyway, I think that Henry can move up in the rankings quite a ways if he comes in professionally on weight. Comes in, dominates Carriazo. I think that we can be looking at a top 5 guy.
The next fight of the evening, going from the little guys to the big guys, heavyweight, as Roy Nelson takes on Alistair Overeem. Looking at Roy Nelson, 7-6 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Mark Hunt in the card that was the main event fight for a fight night in Japan in September, and 13 of his 20 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Alistair Overeem, just 3-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Stefan Struve at Fox 13, and of his 38 career victories, 19 are by submission, but he also boasts 16 knockouts. This is kind of a fight of the mediocre heavyweights, Dave. I kind of read off the record. Overeem 3-3, Nelson 7-6. I think if Nelson wins, it doesn't really do much for him. He's not going to get a crack at the title anytime soon. If Overeem can win, it really helps boost him. Like I said, a guy who has not lived up to his potential since coming over from Strikeforce. And a win against Roy Nelson, I don't think gives him an immediate title shot, but he starts to look intriguing again as a title contender. Now, I think if he wins, because we didn't get that fight with JDS and Travis Brown, we got Brown and Arlovski, which I still think is a great matchup. I think if Overeem wins, he gets JDS next. And the winner of that could possibly get a title shot. I think that's very realistic. If Nelson wins, honestly, I don't know. Maybe a rematch with Hunt or something, but that doesn't do as much for the division.
Scott Coker's licking his lips at this point.
The loser goes to Bellator, right? Yeah. Maybe, I don't know. But
after Kimbo's dominant victory, he'll get Alistair Overeem.
Right. It should be a fun fight, though. The question is, can Nelson weather the early storm by Overeem? He has a great chin. He could do that, but as this fight goes on, I think it plays into Roy Nelson. I think he's proven that he's going to be around. If you let him hang around more times than not, he can land that one punch that can make a difference.
Jim,
and for Overeem, I think he has to get this fight done quickly to avoid that chance. Because if it goes 15, I think Roy Nelson and his just incredible chin and will and heart may end up winning out a decision.
Jim, you're in trouble because I've stepped up my broadcast journalism for this show. Had a lot of time to think about this, and I'm taking it to a whole nother level here. A couple of things. When you fight Roy Nelson, you can't mess up because he, like you said, he'll be around and he'll take advantage. You almost have to fight a perfect fight in order to beat him. Because if you go in all guns a-blazing, he'll land something when there's an opening. He'll just wait and wait and wait for that opening. Much like when Stipe fought him. Stipe had a perfect game plan against him. When he threw his punches, he covered back up, never left himself really open for a huge shot, and he walked out victorious. Can Overeem do that? He can. Will he? I'm not sure. In the fights that we've seen in the UFC, why does Overeem not use his length? Like with his kicks? Why doesn't he ever use that to his advantage? I can't be the only one who sees that. He's bigger than everybody in the division. You think that he could keep him, at arm's reach away. But that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, Overeem's 3-3 in the UFC, but when you really sit back and look at his record, he could arguably be 6-0.
Right.
He very easily could have won all 3 fights that he lost, and that's not up for debate. That's a fact. He probably should have beat Travis Brown. He probably should have beat Bigfoot Silva, and he probably should have beat Ben Rothwell.
Right, but what's crazy is didn't Rothwell? He got on the inside and was able to land punches.
Right. Yeah. It's also because Overeem doesn't put his hands up too.
It baffles me. It would be like him not putting his hands up as a heavyweight would be along the same lines of us. Hold on, I have a perfect example of what it would be like. Stall for time. Talk about a sponsor or something.
Well, this fight, like I said, very intriguing. This probably could have been a main event of a fight night itself.
I'm ready.
But we get on the main card, and it should be a good one here. And for Dave's answer.
So, him not putting up his hands in a fight would be like us recording a podcast with this going on while we're talking. Just talking and just having music. You know what I'm saying? If somebody called and was like, when you guys record, it's really loud. You need to fix that. Nobody in Overeem's camp is like, hey, bro, you throw a left, cover the face,
Yeah, I don't. It's simple things, but yeah.
Hey, I have a text that has come in. Steve Sadler, VigilanteMMA.com. Throw that out there. He says he's pro Nelson in this fight. Reem's chin is done. Nelson is most likely to land a big one. Nelson does not get knocked out besides Hunt. Those are the pros for Roy Nelson. For Alistair Overeem, Nelson tends to lose to guys who are big and great athletes. For Doom and JDS. Just food for thought.
All right, with that said, let's move on to our next matchup in the welterweight division. As former welterweight champion Johnny Hendricks will take on the immortal Matt Brown. Looking at Johnny Hendricks, 11-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Robbie Lawler, where he lost his welterweight title at UFC 181, and 8 of his 16 career victories are by knockout. Matt Brown, 12-5 in the UFC. His last fight also a loss to Robbie Lawler at the main event for UFC on Fox 12, and 12 of his 19 victories are by knockout. The interesting part of this fight, Dave, is when Matt Brown gets taken down, because I don't see any reason why Johnny Hendricks can't take Matt Brown down, is what Matt Brown can do off his back. He's very active in his guard. He has pretty solid jiu-jitsu and submissions, and an incredible work ethic and pace. Now, this is only a 3-round fight, so Hendricks should, he always says, for these 5-round fights, he's fighting at 70% or whatever. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. So, in theory, with it only being 15 minutes, Dave, he should be fighting at more than 70% in his words.
Should be at 210%.
Right? So, with that added in, obviously Matt Brown fighting a 15-minute fight, what can he do off his back? Standing up, Hendricks has vastly improved in his stand-up. Obviously, he has very great power, but Matt Brown is a tough guy to put away, and he throws punches and bunches, and he's on you in a hurry. He doesn't let you breathe, and he has this very suffocating style. And he's always in your face. And if I was Hendricks, I would not allow Matt Brown to do that to me. I would try to take him down as quickly as possible. And that's why I think the question of this fight will be, what can Matt Brown do off his back? Will he do enough to stop Hendricks from punching him? Will he catch Hendricks in submissions? Or will he be able to get back up to his feet to try that suffocating style? Those are what he's going to have to do to be successful, because if he gets taken down and he can't do anything, he can't threaten him with submissions, then Johnny Hendricks is probably going to get either a 3-round decision or knock him out, because he's going to those big bombs, he don't need too many to land, Dave, to get a knockout. So that's the question of the fight to me is, when Hendricks takes down Matt Brown, what can Matt Brown do to be successful in that position?
Here's an interesting stat that I just found out. How many fights did you say Matt Brown had?
In the UFC?
Total.
I
He's 19
I don't
and
know in his
12.
career. Yeah, in the UFC he's 12-5
So 19 and 12, and that's
overall. Yep.
31. Okay, in 31 fights, Matt Brown has ended a fight in one round 9 times, either win or lose. Hendricks has 19 fights, I believe. That's what I saw. 19 professional fights. Is that what I saw? Yeah, 19 fights. 5 of his fights have ended in the first round. So both of these guys can finish fights, but they don't have to do it early. These guys will hang around. There might be a slight feeling out process, but I think this fight's going to be great. I think it's going to be fun, but I don't think it's going to end early. I think both of these guys are going to look like they've been in a war when they're done. And I'm always concerned for somebody like a Hendricks. Can he get up for a fight like this? I mean, a win over Matt Brown gets you back in title contention, obviously. But can he physically get himself up for this fight? Matt Brown knows a win here does a lot for him. You know, that gets him top 2 or 3 in the division, clearly.
Well, you got to also throw in Johnny Hendricks is from Texas. This will kind of be like a hometown fight for him. And I think he's going to get up for that, maybe more so than who his opponent is. I think he's getting up more for the reasons what happens with this fight being in his hometown and a possible title shot after than it is necessarily Matt Brown.
Right.
But we'll see. It should be a good one. I really like this matchup, and I think it was again, Matt Brown was supposed to main event that card in Broomfield, and I think the way that night turned out and moving him to fight Hendricks, I think ended up being a very good decision by the UFC.
Who was he supposed to fight in Broomfield?
I thought it was Matt Brown against Stephen Thompson, and then it was Matt Brown, Hector Lombard, I think. And then I think
you
Lombard
know what? You're absolutely right.
I think he got pushed to fight McDonald, and then that fight got scrapped. And then the next biggest fight was Thompson and Thatch, so that got moved up, and then Thompson got hurt, and then Ben Henderson came in. I think it was something like that.
Anyways, even when Ben Henderson's not even on the card, he gets talked about on Beyond the Cage.
There you go. All right. Co-main events of the evening for the UFC Strawweight Championship as Carla Esparza will put her title on the line for the first time against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I think that's how they're pronouncing it. I should know how to pronounce it, right? I'm Polish. She's from Poland. Very Polish last name. I should know how to pronounce it, but I don't think I did correctly. But Joanna, she's the only strawweight, Dave, with a 2-0 record in the UFC, undefeated in her career at 8-0. Her last fight, she defeated Claudia Gadelha at Fox 13, and of her 8 career victories, 5 are by decision. Looking at Carla, of course, as we know, the former Invicta FC strawweight champion, came into the Ultimate Fighter, was the number 1 seed, left the number 1 seed, and the UFC champion, defeating Rose Namajunas for the inaugural strawweight title for the UFC at the Ultimate Fighter 20 finale. And of her 10 career victories, 4 are by submission. Now, of course, Joanna is known for her kickboxing. If it stays standing, I think very easily she can beat Carla Esparza. But Carla is probably the best wrestler in this division. And that's going to be her game plan, is going to try to take this fight to the ground. And much like Matt Brown against Johnny Hendricks, what can Joanna do off her back to give Carla problems? Will she be able to get back up to her feet and use her superior stand-up, or will she threaten for submissions and kind of frustrate Carla? That to me is the story of this fight, because we know that's what Carla's game plan is going to be, and she's done it against many opponents, and she has been very successful doing that. So if Joanna's not ready for wrestling, she's going to be in for a long night.
I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. This is the biggest fight of Carla Esparza's life. She's never been in a situation that she's about to be in this week. Um, I'm sure that I wasn't there. You were there live, but I'm sure that the Ultimate Fighter finale, off of a show that probably didn't have the greatest ratings, I'm sure was a little bit subdued compared to what she's going to see in Dallas, where all eyes are going to be on her, and the main event, obviously. But she's going to have twice, three times the media. She's going to have 100 different things to do, and it'll be interesting. Joanna's fought on two Fox cards before with big names. She's kind of been through the extra bright lights of the UFC, and it'll be. I don't doubt that Carlos Esparza will be able to overcome all that, but this is the first time it's going to happen on the level that she's about to be on.
All right, to the main event of the. No, that is correct.
You like that?
Yeah,
okay.
I can agree with that sentiment.
You just left me hanging there. I was hoping for a "you're an idiot, Dave" or something.
No. If I disagreed, I would have said something. How about that?
Fair enough. Cheers.
All right, let's get to the main event. Rafael Dos Anjos against Anthony Pettis for the UFC lightweight title. Rafael Dos Anjos is... Yes?
Just make sure, if you want to listen to this live, do not go to combatcardboard.com and see our picks. Throw that out there.
Some people have already done that.
But don't do that. All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. Well, real quick, since you had to interrupt, he at Cardboard Combat, just kind of restarting up. They're about cards, kind of like similar to our friends at A&N Sports. And he asked me for the pick, and I didn't realize he wanted me to expand upon my pick. So I just put my pick as Anthony Pettis, and he has this panel of people, and it shows all like their reasoning, and mine just says my pick is Anthony Pettis, and I was like, oh, I look like an idiot. So if anyone had never seen our show before, they didn't think I was articulate at all, and I didn't have any reasoning behind my pick. But he just asked for my pick. I didn't realize he wanted me to expand upon it. So I guess that's kind of my bad on that. But I was like, man, I guess I should have said a little more to that. But I will say a little more now here for the main event.
Guess who did expand on it? This fellow right here.
All right, well, I'm about to say it right now. So, Rafael Dos Anjos, the challenger, 12-4 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Nate Diaz at Fox 13. Just to say real quick, did everyone that fight at Fox 13, they're now fighting on this card? I swear I've said Fox 13 like 7 times.
I'm going to effort that for you right now.
Well, I have, at least on the main card, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 people that fought at Fox 13 are now fighting on this card, just in the main card. Pretty incredible. Anyways, let me continue on my breakdown. And 11 of 23 wins for Rafael Dos Anjos are by decision. Looking at the champion Anthony Pettis, 5-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory over Gilbert Melendez at UFC 181. And of his 18 career victories, 8 are by submission. All right. Standing up, Pettis has the more knockout power. You could say he's the more exciting. He's the more explosive striker. But Rafael Dos Anjos has pretty good leg kicks, pretty good combinations, and I mean, you can ask Ben Henderson. He must hit pretty hard. I mean, he's the only one to do that to Ben Henderson. So he has pretty solid stand-up. Jiu-jitsu-wise, I think pure jiu-jitsu, Rafael Dos Anjos is better. But I think actually going and implementing submissions and kind of being slick and actually finishing people by submissions is Anthony Pettis. Overall grappling and wrestling, obviously, it lies with Rafael Dos Anjos. Now, I think Rafael will have a very similar game plan to Gilbert Melendez. I expect him to push the pace and be in Anthony's face from start to finish, not allowing Anthony to get space and land some of those very exciting kicks that he's known for. I think that has to be his game plan, Dave. I think if you're going to stand at range with Anthony Pettis, that's a very bad idea. It's not going to end well for you, and you're going to see why his moniker is called Showtime. Because it seems like, at least so far in the UFC, Dave, if he's given room, he knocks you out. Plain and simple. You can ask Joe Lozon. You can ask Donald Cerrone. You go back to the WC, you can ask Danny Castillo. I mean, you can ask these guys. Uh, but again, you could say the problem is, well, maybe you push him up against the cage, you have the risk of being submitted, like Ben Henderson or Gilbert Melendez. He just finds ways to put guys away, and you have to be on your very best to not get finished by this gentleman. And for Rafael Dos Anjos, he has to be in his face and not allowing Pettis to breathe for 25 minutes. I fully believe that. Do I think he can do that? I don't know. I think there's a chance, but I think somewhere there's going to be some moment and some slip, and Pettis will take advantage of it.
Yeah, Dos Anjos is a grinder, and he's going to grind this fight out, or he's going to attempt to grind this fight out. And much like I was saying about Roy Nelson, that he'll find Pettis is really good at finding openings if a mistake is made. And, that's why these guys get to become champions. Is Anthony Pettis the greatest lightweight in the UFC right now? Maybe. He's one of the best at exploiting people who make mistakes in fights. And that's why he's where he is. That's why he's Showtime. One thing that I go back to is Dos Anjos is not a huge name that lots of people know. Can Pettis get up for a fight like this? There's lots of money on the line, obviously, but is he looking past this one, for a fight against somebody like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Cerrone, something a little more high profile? I don't know. I hope he's not looking past Dos Anjos, because if he is, he's going to go home with his luggage about 15 pounds lighter. And we'll find out come Saturday.
With that said, Dave, let's get to picks for UFC 185. First fight of the evening, flyweight division. Chris Carriazo, Henry Cejudo. Chris Carriazo is my pick here. I think he's the more experienced fighter, and I think the more well-rounded fighter, and has never had an issue with weight.
I'm going to take Henry just based on his grappling. So.
All right. Let's go next here. Heavyweight, Overeem against Nelson. I've never been a huge fan of Overeem, so I'll be rooting for Roy Nelson, but I think Overeem has a better chance to win, and like I said, I think it does more for the division if Overeem wins as opposed to Nelson. So give me Alistair Overeem.
I'm going to take Roy Nelson just because I don't, like we were saying about him keeping his hands up and not keeping his hands up. I think that's a situation we're going to run into. So I'll take Nelson.
Or Overeem will run into.
Right.
See what I did there? All right. Yeah. Welterweight division, Johnny Hendricks against Matt Brown. I really like Matt Brown. He has a very exciting and fun style, but I don't think he'll be able to do that against the wrestling and takedowns of Johnny Hendricks. So give me a Big Rig in his home state to win.
I think Big Rig wins, but there's the hope in me that Matt Brown wins, because I feel like kind of gives us a little more fresher blood, maybe, at the top of the division. So I think Hendricks is going to win, but I'm going to pick Matt Brown just because kind of freshens it up a little bit.
All right, just so people are wondering that Dave and I just always pick the same people, we have picked opposite 3 fights in a row. So there's to all the naysayers and haters out there. All right, co-main event, Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Carla Esparza. It's Carla. I think Joanna is a great up-and-coming talent, but I don't think her grappling is at the level of Carla yet. And I thought she maybe needed another fight before this one, but they gave it to her anyway. And I got to go with Carla at this point.
Yeah, I think Carla's going to GSP her. She's going to be able to take her down at will, and she'll walk out probably with a unanimous decision victory.
Rafael Dos Anjos against Anthony Pettis, UFC Lightweight Championship. As people know, I'm a huge fan of Anthony Pettis, so it's very hard for me to pick against him. I'm not going to here. I think Dos Anjos has a chance to win. He has a grinding style. I think he can grind Pettis, but again, he's never fought 25 minutes before. And having to be perfect for 25 minutes against a guy that can capitalize on the slightest of opportunities is going to be very tough to do. So give me Showtime, Anthony Pettis.
On Combat Cardboard, I picked Rafael Dos Anjos because, for lack of a better term, I think that Pettis is trying to look past him at bigger and better fights, super fights and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to pick Dos Anjos.
All right. Before we end the show here, we have to mention our good friend Darren Cruikshank. He will be fighting on the undercard of UFC 185, and they will be on FX and not Fox Sports 1. So make sure, if you can't catch the prelims, to DVR them on FX. Darren will be fighting Beneil Dariush. He'll be part of 4 fights starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on FX for the prelims, and it should be a fun one. If you missed it, I interviewed Darren for this fight last week. It's right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast, and another great interview from Darren. And I think it's going to be a tremendous fight with him and Beneil, and it was a good fight for him to book, considering he couldn't get KJ Noons once again. So it should be fun. So definitely check out that interview.
Yeah, good interview. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but yeah, good interview.
All right, any final thoughts here, Dave?
Nope.
All right, he is the Juice, Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I am your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. Please like Beyond the Cage on Facebook, facebook.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast. And, of course, hopefully you're already subscribed right here to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BeyondTheCagePodcast. As mentioned earlier, we've got to thank our partners at MMASignaturesUSA.com, MMAforLife.ca, MMAinsider.net, of course, Vigilante MMA, and Bluegrass MMA, supporting the local scene here in the Midwest. And if you go on their Facebook page right now, Bluegrass MMA, I believe they have a link to help out former UFC heavyweight champion Mark Coleman. I believe he has a GoFundMe page. I think he came down with a serious illness and is looking to try to battle through this illness. And if you want to support Mark Coleman, I think you can go to his GoFundMe page and you can donate some money. And I think you can win some sort of prizes or memorabilia as a part of donating. So if you're a fan of Mark Coleman or you just like helping people in need, check that out. So we definitely, in Bluegrass MMA, was kind of efforting that cause on the GoFundMe page. So, all right, cool. He's the Juice, Dave Sadler. I'm Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.